What we're going to talk about today is something that's been on the shooting scene for over 300 years and has always been kind of on the edge of the radar. As a matter of fact, when Lewis and Clark did their expedition across the United States, they carried a big bore air gun, a Giordani repeating rifle. So we'll kind of go through the top 10 frequently asked questions of big bore air guns. I'm kind of new at this myself, so don't hold me to everything that's being the gospel truth. The first thing we'll do is we'll talk a little bit about what exactly is a big bore air gun. To answer the question, what is it? It's universally accepted that anything over 25 caliber is considered a big bore air gun. Now, here's a 25 caliber pellet. That's about 25 or 30 grains of lead right there. Now, these can't rightly be called pellets. I mean, look at that. That's a 51 caliber slug made out of soft lead so that it'll expand. Here's a more exaggerated version of the same thing. Now, these are made by a guy named Mr. Hollopoint, he calls himself, and he's pretty much the go-to source for ammunition for these custom guns. Here's another one here, another 51 caliber. So, these things are available starting at 303 caliber and going up to just about whatever you want, all the way up to shotgun slug size. So what does one look like? Well, it just so happens we've got one here. Alright, now most of these things are going to come from custom shops. Guys that have lathes and milling machines and machine shops in their garage that put these things out on a one-by-one basis. There are a couple of factory jobs available. Day States makes a dang nice 303. It's a little pricey, but in that one I would still say the ammunition for that, it looks like a pellet. 357 Rogue, which is kind of a techno advanced looking thing with electronics in it and everything else. But those are available. There's some outfits in Korea that make some. Sam Yang, I believe, is the guy's name. And so you're just going to have to look around. This is not something you're going to find at Cabela's or Bass Pro. Seems kind of funny, none of the stuff that I like is. But anyway, here's one of the custom made ones. This one's made by Extreme Air Guns, a guy named Brent Hogue and Alan Avram. And it takes a little while to get one of these because they are custom and done quite well to your specifications. It took me overall at least 4 months to get this one. Pretty big hole in the end of that thing. This one has to be a 457, so hence the classification big bore. That's what a big bore air gun looks like. Now, this is not a light machine. I don't know what this weighs, but it's going to be an armful if you got very far to walk. I'm thinking in my advanced stage I'm better off just sitting in a tree stand waiting for a deer or pig to walk by. So that's what one looks like. This one, 457. We've got a 50 caliber on the way. I'll show you that when I get here. All right, here we are at our secret air base, which we can't tell you where it is because we'd have to kill you. And the project for today is to unpack and test out the shoebox compressor and also refill one of the air guns and take some test shots. So we're working with old nuclear powered Vern here, and he's largely responsible for the whole refill operation, so we'll see how this goes. Alright, what we got going here is one of the ways to recharge the air in the gun. This is called a shoebox compressor. and it's rated at 4,500 psi, so it should bring this gun up to full operating pressure. Now what we really need is a gauge in this line so we can see where we're at. Right now we're counting on the automatic shut-off device of the pump to shut it down when it gets to maximum pressure. There is a way to adjust the fuel pressure on the pump. The bad news is this is not cheap. It's over $1,000 for the full pump. It's hooked into a 125 psi compressor that's supplying the source air, and this little mechanism right here is what I call a force multiplier. It's just trying to take that 125 psi, bring it up to 4,500 psi. It's been going for about 5 minutes now. I got a feeling it may go for a while. So we've got the timer going here. We'll see how long it takes to get from 3,500 to 4,500 psi. Now another way, fill the gun up, probably the least expensive way, is with this tank right here. This is carbon fiber tank, 4,500 psi fill, and the bad thing about this is once you fill it the first time, then it drops down to something below 4,500 psi, so you're constantly going downhill on your subsequent fills. The good news is it's somewhat portable, not expensive, comparatively speaking anyway, and it's got a gauge on it so you can see what you're doing. The other good thing about this is probably when we test the gun, we're going to plug this directly into it so we don't have to fill it up every time. It'll be not at optimal pressure, but pretty close to it for a test. The other way to fill the gun up is with this field setup thing we got here. Now, I have to explain the actual operation of this thing, but basically it's the same thing. We take regulated 125 psi air, going into this force multiplier here, driving down a large diameter piston, which then goes into a small diameter. So we've got 3,000 psi to that high pressure side, and then by operating this little manual valve here, then we can take 125 psi air, push a piston that's pushing 3,000 psi air, and multiplying that up to an eventual 45 pounds. And what you becomes for $2. All right, now our compressor just shut off. It went from a 3,500 to a 4,500 psi fill. And how long did it take it?
8 minutes.
8 minutes.
Maybe.
Okay, we took 2 shots with the air gun filled up to what we think is 4,500 psi. Then we hooked it back into the compressor, and it took a little over 11 minutes to bring it back up to cutoff threshold again. So these things are air pigs. There's no getting around that. Now we're going to do a little chronograph test.
Ready?
Yep.
$11.11.
Woo! That thing is screaming. 11:11. All right, so second shot without refilling, 146 grain round ball.
Error.
Dang it. Well, we got an error on that one. All right, third shot with a 146 round ball is 972, so that's still smoking. Okay, class, just what you wanted, more theory about big bore air guns. But when I first started looking at this idea of actually hunting big game with a pellet gun or air rifle, I started to wonder how much power do these things really have? In other words, are they capable of bringing down something like an elk or a pig or whatever? Obviously they do, because there's plenty of video on YouTube of them doing it. Pass-throughs on hogs and elk and Watusi cows and all other manner of things. But anyway, being an armchair scientist, I wanted to try and get a handle on it. So I looked at some of the usual ways of calculating power, and I found that none of these formulas that have been looked at over the centuries of bullets and guns, and as long as there's campfires, there's going to be discussions about what's the best caliber, which has more knockdown factor than the other. But all these ideas have some failings. Velocity, of course, figures into the equation. The faster an object goes, the more kinetic energy it's going to have. Now, some of you people that are physics instructors, feel free to write comments and correct me, as long as you do that in a nice way. And then mass has a lot to do with it. Now, typically when we look at ballistic figures, we look at velocity and foot-pounds of energy. And that tells part of the story. As far as sheer power is concerned, that may give you some idea of what a round is capable of. But it doesn't account for a lot of other things, like the caliber of the bullet. A bigger caliber bullet is going to make a bigger hole, and it's going to do more tissue damage. Bullet design is not figured into the foot-pounds of energy equation. A hollow point may be more effective at destroying tissue and bone than a full metal jacket bullet, or vice versa. It just depends. It's hard to put a quantitative number on that. Bullet construction has a lot to do with it. They've got some new bullets out there called RIP bullets, or rest in peace, that have striations on the case that actually cause that bullet to fly apart when it strikes something, and sends like 5 different little petals of shrapnel out in various directions. So that bullet may be more destructive on animal tissue than a full metal jacket bullet, or just an old lead bullet. And there's other factors involved in it. Well, what angle does the bullet hit the tissue? What part of the animal does the bullet hit? Has it got to go through bone? How big is the animal? So all these things, when you put them together, result in what I call chaos theory. Now again, those that are really familiar with chaos theory are going to roll your eyes. But what chaos theory says is that a very small change in initial conditions, in this case many initial conditions, can greatly affect the final outcome. The thought kind of that a butterfly flapping its wings in Japan over a long enough period of time would affect the weather patterns of North America. Now that's a little extreme example, but anyway, you can see that in trying to get a handle on what I call smackdown factor, or killing power, if you will, or stopping power, whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of things to consider. So now when I looked at these, mass and velocity, you can come up with foot-pounds of energy, and that's an indication. I looked at something called Taylor knockout factor. Old man Taylor was an African PH during the last century that, based on his observations, he didn't think that just the normal foot-pounds of energy equation led enough credit to the caliber of the bullet. He was of the opinion that large caliber, bullets of moderate speed actually perform better in the field than they would look like they did on paper. So he kind of rewrote the laws of physics into his equation, and weighted the caliber and the mass of the bullet a little bit heavier to make it come out the way he wanted. Now you can't just go around rewriting the laws of physics. And I was excited about Taylor knockdown factor until I realized I actually calculated the Taylor knockdown factor of a baseball. thrown at 90 miles an hour. And that comes out with twice as much knockdown energy as any rifle I've got, and I've got some big ones. So bonking an elephant on the noggin with a 90-mile-an-hour baseball, even if you could throw one that fast, is probably just going to piss him off, and that's not a good technique. So Taylor knockdown factor did not hold up in the real world, although you can use it to give you some indication of what the different calibers make, but I found the fatal flaw in it. So I came up with my own smackdown factor equation. We're going to call this Dagg's theorem. So in Dagg's theorem, now remember this is a theory, not a law. I'm not sure exactly when a theory becomes a law, maybe when it can't be shown to come out with results of any other way. But in Dagg's theorem, as it pertains to big bore air rifle hunting, we're going to postulate that a well-aimed shot plus a large caliber bullet plus a heavy bullet traveling at subsonic speeds of close to 7.8 to 1.0 Mach that strikes the central nervous system or the central respiratory system or the central circulatory system of an animal is going to yield a good chance of nighty-night, bedtime for Bonzo. That's when the pencil broke and all she wrote. Now how well this is going to pan out in real life remains to be seen, and we're going to be done with this classroom crap here pretty soon. Most of you guys already know all this stuff anyway. Anybody that's done any hunting has seen the effect of a 22 caliber bullet as opposed to a 50 caliber bullet or something maybe slightly smaller than that. So we're going to abandon all this hee-yah and go on to some actual shooting. And this is kind of the fun part. We're going to shoot some boards, we're going to shoot some milk jugs, and various other things. Remember, these big bore air guns, you don't have that many follow-up shots. It's going to take some time to reload this thing, so you want that first shot to put the animal down if possible. Okay, destructive test number 1, 2 before at 25 yards, 280 grain bullet, and not quite a full fill on the tank. Alright, on a standard 2 before, which is not really a 2 before, we all know, we got a complete pass through on that. And that was with the gun not pumped up to full power. So now what we're going to do is the same thing, except part of the problem is we're firing right into a knot. Oh, but you move your dot, so we'll move the dot up. Turn the cameras off, we'll fill the gun up again. Where's the hole? Right here. That's the back side of the board. Here's the front side of the board. You can see it split it. So obviously there's a difference not shooting at the knot and using a hard cast bullet. So went through all three of them. That bullet went through 3 tube bores, and that was the second shot. Now, why it hit a little bit higher than that, I'm not exactly sure, but bad aim. Alright, Big Red test number 1. Man, I got Big Red all over my camera. Alright, sun-kissed orange soda and concrete block versus 457 Extreme. Alright, here's the 2, I don't know, 300 grain hard cast bullet. And I guess that's a good demonstration of the penetrating effect of soft lead versus hard lead. It busted both sides of this concrete block after going through several ounces of orange crush. There's bullet fragments all in there. So now the ultimate test: 457 caliber extreme pellet gun against a bowling ball.
That's what I thought. Be smart.
Well, we know not to shoot bowling balls. Old Colonel Townsend Whelan once said that only accurate guns are interesting. Have to follow along with old Colonel on that one. Now, our accuracy test, we were kind of running out of time by the time we got to that. We'll do some more of them. But these aren't too disappointing. here we are with our 280 grain bullet at 50 yards. Now, we've got lots of different kinds of bullets for this. We just picked one, so there might be one that performs a little bit better than this. Also, we probably had 30-40 rounds through this gun by the time we got to here, and we didn't clean it. So, not making excuses, but I'm saying I think we can improve on these results somewhat anyway. But it's not too bad. Here we are. Here's one way over here. We're not counting that one because I couldn't stand it. I just had to bring the scope in. The scope was newly mounted on the rifle, so it was close, but I wanted to bring it in, so I made an adjustment, so we're not counting that one. And then I believe I took 3 shots at the plate, and I don't think we refilled the gun. So there's another thing. If we refill the gun every time, I think this would be a lot better because it would be shooting at a more consistent pressure. But anyway, here's a dead bullseye. Here's one over here about 3/4 of an inch off. And if you measure that out, all right, now the way you do this is you measure from edge to edge of the holes. So we'll take these two here. And that comes out to about 1 3/4 of an inch. Then you're going to subtract the caliber of the bullet, which is 50, so that comes out to a 1 1/4 inch group at 50 yards with an air rifle. So Vern and I, you'll see in a little bit, we'll do another shot at 100 yards on a melon, about the size of this plate, maybe a little bit smaller, and he hits it first time. So we've concluded that even shooting a 50 caliber slug with an air gun, it's accurate enough for hunting use. Now, bench rest guys measure their performance in thousandths of an inch, varmint guys in fractions of an inch, but for a deer pig gun, especially an air rifle at 100 yards, and that would come out to about a 3-inch group. That's not a tack driver, but that's good enough. And like I said, I think we can improve on this if we spend a little time with it. So this was just a quick and dirty test, 1.5-inch group, 50 yards. All right, nobody's allowed to video me without my hat, but I've got to cross 2 fences to go get it, so you'll just have to bear with me here. Here's the results of our ballistic drop test, which somewhat surprising and possibly disturbing to me because it didn't come out the way I wanted it to. But again, you can't slew the results to make it come out to what you think. So here's with the gun sighted in at 50 yards, 288 grain bullet, and we're filling it up to 4,500 psi and taking 2 consecutive shots. So here's the 25-yard shot, which went a little over 1 inch high, which that's predictable. That's about what I thought it would have done. 50-yard shot, pretty much dead on. Now here's what surprised me. I would have thought the 75-yard shot would have been about 6 inches low down here. But that's not where it went. The first one went here. I believe this was the second one. So if you average it out, about right there. So there's really not any difference between the 50 and the 75-yard shot. Don't know why. Now we went out to 100. Now, in all fairness to the guys who made this gun, we've probably run 50 rounds through this thing and we haven't cleaned it. So that's about a 3-inch group right there, but we cleaned the gun and pumped it up to 4,500 psi every shot. It'd probably be a lot better than this. Anyway, here we are. We averaged those 2 shots out about right there. This corresponds with the second dot on our ballistic scope, and this corresponds with about the third dot on our ballistic scope. So at 100 yards, if we aim up 2 to 2.5 dots, I think we're in the ballpark. I'll measure this all out later. I don't know, what's that? 5 inches maybe. So about a 5-inch drop at 100 yards. Not too bad. Now, the second shot going lower may be a result of us not filling the gun up. But like I say, I got to cross 2 fences and a bar ditch to get over to where the filler up thing is. But with a well-aimed shot at a pig, 100 yards, that should have done it. So Vern's pumping the gun up now. What we're going to do at this point is we're going to take a 100-yard shot, applying the theory of the aim points here on our ballistic scope at this melon right here. And I figure if we can hit this melon from 100 yards, we can hit a pig or deer. Now I just got to figure out how to get this melon where we can shoot at it without it falling off. I'm going to predict that old Deadeye Vern over here probably going to hit that melon the first time from 100 yards. Now, our shooting station is way down there, 100 yards away. You don't have any way of knowing if I'm tricking you on these shots, but you just have to take my word for it. But we really don't have any reason to trick you. We're just scientists doing what we do. Well, here's old Vern, the melon killer, and our theory proved out to work, which I just love it. I love it when a theory works out. So what we're doing here is we're aiming at the orange dot every time. We know that as soon as the bullet leaves the barrel of the gun, it's got to go gravity effects and it starts heading downhill. So to make longer shots, you have to point the barrel up. So at 25 yards, as predicted, the bullet hit high. It's still climbing. At 50 yards is where we had the gun zeroed. It hit pretty much in line, maybe a little bit to the left, but altitude-wise, it was dead on. 75, I would have predicted that the bullet would have been down here somewhere. And why they ended up here, I actually took a second shot just to prove to myself that I wasn't seeing things. I don't know why that worked out the way it did, but that's the way it worked out. And then at 100, of course, bullet's running out of energy, starting to fall. I think this was the first one, this was the second one. And we were able to put our crosshairs on the dot and then count the number of little sub dots, I guess you would say, on the scope, on the ballistic scope, and determine where we should aim to hit this melon. And Vern took one shot at it, and it looks like he pretty much hit it.
It still looks like you need it.
Dead center. I don't know. Kind of nasty looking. But the melon is definitely dead. So, that's a real-time ballistic curve.
There you go.
Didn't come out the way I thought it should have, but still. I think we've agreed that the gun is capable of killing the pig at 100 yards.
Yep.
So, there you have it. Now we gotta carry all this crap back. Another frequently asked question is, what can you hunt with these things? Well, now the answer to that's going to depend a lot on where you live. In places like the District of Columbia or California, guns of any kind are viewed as bad and evil, and tax-paying, law-abiding citizens can't be trusted with any form of them whatsoever. But out here in the Wild West in Arizona, they've recently added some text to the hunting regulations, and you can hunt just about anything except turkey. I guess they want you to shoot those with a shotgun for some reason. Buffalo and elk. Now, if you live in a place like Texas, where there's a lot of private land, what we call high fence land, where they have exotic game and things like that, and especially feral pigs, I'm assuming the answer to that is pretty much anything you want, as long as the landowner agrees to let you use that method to do it. All right, in closing on this big bore air gun thing, we'll look at some of the pros and cons of the whole thing, and you can decide on your own whether you think this is for you. I kind of wrote down the good and the bad. Some of them, it's not a comprehensive list, and they're not necessarily in order. But for me, one of the good things is it's just fun. It's a challenge. It's kind of going back to the days when I used to roam around our ranch in Texas with a little pump-up pellet gun and endanger all manner of varmints. And this is kind of taking it to the next level. It's unique. There's a certain amount of pride, I guess you'd say, or geekiness, showing up at the hunting camp with something new that nobody's seen, and then actually going out and coming back with deer or pig or elk or whatever it is. So the fun factor is probably the biggest attribute to the whole thing. It's self-contained, sort of. You know, you're not dependent on somebody else for ammunition. We live in some crazy times right now. You can't find 22 ammunition. It's probably, from what I understand, a year out. So you're not dependent on people to do that. You could get a bullet mold and make your own ammo. When I left the ammo at home the other day and needed to test the gun, I stopped at the sporting goods store and got some black powder ammunition. You can run ball through this thing, you can run sabots through it, depending on the barrel that you purchase, of course. And of course there's Mr. Hollow Point that makes some really nice ammunition for this thing. So as long as there's lead available and a means of melting it, then you're going to be self-contained as far as ammunition. Powder you can't find now. Every time I go to the sporting goods store, I look for Reloader 19, and they just don't have it, and it's a ways out too. Well, propellant for an air rifle is air, so if you've got a way of compressing the air, then you're good to go. Number 3 I put here is less restrictive. Now, this is probably in the eyes of the law classified as a lethal weapon, so I don't want to get too carried away with this, but you don't need any kind of permit for this thing in the state of Arizona anyway. Now some of you that live in places like Connecticut, California, you might want to check your local laws, but you don't have to register this thing. I didn't send any form to the government when I bought it. It arrived in the mail, and there again, you know, you need to check your local laws to see if that's legal, because in places like the UK, one of these big bore air rifles is the same as a centerfire rifle. The government is so bent on protecting us from ourselves that they make all these onerous laws. 4, it's unique. Not very many people got them. You can be assured that if you show up at the range or hunt camp with a big bore air rifle, the other guys are going to be interested in seeing what you got. So that's kind of neat. And they're either going to give you a ration of grief or they're going to be amazed about it. So that's some of the good things about going the next level up with this big bore air gun. The bad, it's number 1 has to be the fact that it's expensive. Remember, most of these are custom rifles. They're built in garage shops and machine shops of guys that kind of do it in their spare time. There's a guy named Quackenbush, and he's so far out on his deliveries that he's not even accepting orders. I find that quite funny, actually. I would like to show up back at the campfire dragging an elk and go, yeah, I've got him with my trusty Quackenbush. But anyway, the good news to that is apparently if you buy a Quackenbush rifle, it doubles in value the minute you get it, because they're very highly well known and rare. Number 2 we've got here is it requires a lot of gear to make these things work. Now, unless you're going to be running back and forth to the scuba shop all the time. That could be as simple as the carbon fiber tank that we showed you that'll get you going. If you go full goose bozo like Vernon and I did and buy all the compressors and come up with your own charging station, that can add up to money. But once you get all that stuff, then again, you're not dependent on anybody to sell you powder or propellant for your gun. Until the government figures out a way to regulate air, you're good to go. All the stuff is bulky. The guns are typically heavy. Now, it's possible to get titanium barrels and charge tubes and things like that, and we'll see how that's going to work out. But for the most part, you know, scuba tanks are heavy, carbon fiber tanks are bulky, compressors and all the gear you're going to need to make this work is going to take up some space, and it doesn't really lend itself to field operations like, say, just sticking a box of 30-06 shells in your pocket. But some of the guys buy these little pony tanks, and they carry them in their backpacks, so that if they need to take more than 3 or 4 shots, then they've got a means of recharging their gun. Another bad thing is low shot count. And that depends on the gun you get, the caliber, the power that you're putting out of that thing. From what I understand, the Day-State 303 can shoot maybe 15-20 times or more on a charge, but it's shooting a small projectile, whereas the big boys, the 500s and up, maybe only 2 shots you're going to get out of that. So if you're the kind of guy that likes to go out and just make a lot of noise, fire a lot of rounds, then this is not the right thing for you. Go get you an AR-15 or AK-47 and annoy the living bejesus out of people like me at the range by just making a lot of racket. But if you're one shot, one kill kind of guy, then hey, check it out. 5, travel. Don't even think about going to the airport with compressed air tanks. I work for an airline, and they are going to send you home with a frown on your face. So if you're going to travel to wherever you're going to hunt, and they find out that that cylinder on that air gun is compressed air, then they may send you home. So anywhere you go to hunt, you're probably going to have to load all your stuff up in the back of your truck and just make a road trip out of it. I fly so much that that doesn't matter to me. I enjoy actually taking a long road trip as opposed to dealing with TSA and some of these other people at the airport. Range. Remember, this is not a high velocity gun, so you know, you're somewhat limited on range, probably 100 yards. There's probably people that can shoot more than 100 yards and good on, but you do have limitations there. Maintenance. These are not maintenance free. They have seals and O-rings and things in them that have to be maintained. You can't just throw it in the gun safe for 20 years and then pull it out and then expect it to work like it did, because these seals are going to deteriorate and so forth. So that's kind of it. There's a reason that this has been on the sidelines for so long, is because all these bad things. But there's a resurgence of interest in these things, and that's why it's hard to find one. Should put that on here too. They're not easy to get a hold of. But if you do your homework and willing to be a little patient, then you can get your hands on one of these things. And if it's the right thing for you, then I think you'll have a lot of fun with it. So, the end.